Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Dolly at the UNC Chapel Hill School of Education, welcoming you to another episode of Innovations in Game-Based Learning hosted by the Mighty program. And today we're very happy to have Enrique Cachaferro with us from Duke University. Yes. Okay, I'm getting my details right. Really excited to hear from you. I had the opportunity to meet Enrique in person a couple of days ago. Um, Feel free to back channel chat during his presentation. If you have questions, there's a little Q&A box down underneath. Just mark that. That'll pull out questions, and Beatrix and I can prompt Enrique during his talk if he doesn't catch the questions as we go. So at this point, I'm going to turn us over to Beatrix to introduce Enrique.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So as Lisa mentioned, Enrique works at Duke University. He's actually the training and education coordinator at Duke, and he's also a former classroom teacher, has spent the better part of the last decade trying out how to use, technology and games and really enliven the classroom. And if you've been to our webinar series before, he's always an active, enthusiastic participant. So I'm just thrilled to hear what he has to say today. So with that, thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Today, I'm going to try to share several different methods that I've used in the past in gamification. And these have been topics that I've presented at conferences, and a lot of times one topic per conference. So I've really pared down the details that I have here. So I apologize if they're a little bit vague. Questions, I'll take questions at the end. I do want to kind of get through the material first. These topics should be applicable to classrooms in the K through 12 or even in higher ed. So hopefully you can get something out of it as I go along. So let me go ahead and get started. Everyone can see my screen okay. I'm hoping Lisa, Beatrix would tell me otherwise. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm a lateral entry teacher, was a lateral entry teacher for 8 years. Before that, I worked at an oncology lab and an engineering firm. So I came to teaching from a private field. I worked at a public high school for 5 of those 8 years, and it was a small high school. It was 1-to-1, and then 3 years at a charter school, a small charter school, which is also 1-to-1. The charter school was building a high school component. It was a K through 8, and it was building a 9 through 12. So they brought me on board to help with the technology. So I had a chance to guide them with what kind of devices to get and how to employ it. So I was kind of a technology facilitator as well as a teacher during that time, and I had a lot of freedom to experiment. That school was a GAF school, so Google Apps for Education school, using Chromebooks and Google Docs for all their work. Presently, I work at Duke University as an education and training coordinator in their safety office. So the first thing I want to talk about was my very first attempt at gamification. It was using basically just mechanics. All these different methods, you'll note, will be different from one another, which is why I thought it might be useful to share with you the method itself and my observations about how well it worked and how easy it was to deploy, in case you're thinking about doing it so in your own classroom or training environment. So the first attempt was simply mechanics. What I did was use what I knew of things like Xbox. I wasn't even aware that anyone else was doing gamifications. This was a few years back, so it wasn't as popular as it is now. And I applied those to a classroom. So what that looks like. As you can see here, it was very analog. This was a cork board. I came up with a number of achievements and experience points. I did research a little bit. I read Lee Sheldon's Multiplayer Classroom, which has a lot of great examples and case studies how to do gamification. In that, he employs points instead of grades. And the way that works is, if you have a quiz that's out of 100 or 120 or 80 points, instead of converting it to percentage, you use it as straight raw points. And doing that, you convert it to experience points. You have levels that you kind of calculate based on how much work the kids do and how quickly they do it per week and per month, per semester. And then the experience points are your grades, pretty much. They're trying to get an X amount of points in a unit time. Achievements I use as a PBIS method, which is trying to get a certain behavior out of them. So some of the achievements that I had were things like Time Ninja. If you're not late to class once in a 3-week period, you get a Time Ninja badge. Or Help Me Help You. If you help tutor a kid that's struggling for a week, you get a help me help you badge. So the badges were kind of ways to promote behaviors from kids. And the way what this looked like was, here's an avatar. The kids got online. We had MacBook Pros, and they made avatars using a simple online program I found, and they printed them out. And then I would actually use little stickers for the levels. They would go up in level. They could only gain. That's the beauty of Lee Sheldon's method of using experience points. You start at 0 at the beginning of the year, and every time you accomplish something, you get points. More points, the better you do. But it's always a positive experience. You don't have, D's and C's and points taken away. You're always gaining, which is a really great concept, and the kids really love that. And then the badges, which I put on there. So every time the kids come into the classroom, they would see their avatar with levels and badges, and it'd be a way to promote their achievement. Now, even though I was doing all this, the classroom itself was unchanged. So it was very traditional. I was still lecturing back then. I was still using worksheets and textbooks. So it was simply a layer of gamification over a very traditional classroom. I was only just starting back then on learning how to teach, and I didn't get to a comfort zone where I thought I could change things dramatically. So I teach biology, and earth science was the main topics that I taught, even though I'm certified to teach any science. Those were my two subjects I did mostly. And biology has an end of course test, and there's a standardized test here in North Carolina. So there are benchmarks that you have to do, and you have to keep track of mastery. To achieve that, I had colored cards. Each card is an objective. There were 4 objectives, and the kids would get benchmarks and tests to see what their mastery levels between 1 and 4, 4 being better than 90% or 80% mastery, and the others being less than that, with 1 being, I think, less than 50%. And then they could see basically the more mastery they achieved in each topic, and this, of course, this picture is from later in the year, once we covered all the topics. The more mastery, the higher their avatar would reach. That picture on top of the note cards is their avatar. So this was a couple of things. One was analytics for me, seeing where every kid was in the classroom at once, as far as their mastery level and the different objectives. It was also help them kind of compete with one another and compare where they were. And then if a kid was low in certain ones, like this one has 2 over here, then they could go back and try again with the benchmarks, do extra work, try it again until they got the extra note cards. So this worked very well. The kids would of their own volition try to get the 4th note card, which would mean more review on their part and more work to go back and take those benchmarks, do better, get that 4 to get extra stacks to get higher up. So both a visual representation of how the class was doing overall, and a way for the kids to commit to improving in any one of the 4 objectives in biology. Again, very analog, lots of paper, lots of printing. I was just getting started, even though we had a computer, I hadn't quite mastered everything I could do with it. All right, so the results. EOC scores, which are the end-all be-all when it comes to biology. I ran 3 classes a semester. I had an honors biology, a regular, and 2 regular biologies. And then, then here's the EOC scores for the state. That's the state average that year. The traditional biology class, and my gamified biology class, and my gamified honors biology class, which ended up all getting 4 or better. The percentages indicate how many kids got above a certain benchmark, a mastery level. So mastery is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Anything below a 3, below a 2 means that they haven't mastered the topic. So they would have to retake biology back then, which ended up going away, and they don't have to retake biology. And so you're looking for 3s and 4s. So this is a percentage of kids that got better than a 3, which is what the state considered mastery back then. And so my honors biology class ended up getting all of them getting better than a 3 on their benchmark. And usually honors biology usually got better than 90%, but that's my first 100%. I've only been doing a couple of years. Then my regular class got 92, which is very high for a regular class. My traditional class did well, but not quite as well. And the state average that year was a 74. So I wouldn't put too much weight on this. I mean, it was just a 2 semesters worth of data that I'm combining here. Classes are what classes are. Sometimes you have more kids, less kids. So I would have a lot more data before I put too much weight on this. I don't have a standard deviation on these. There's some outliers. However, I can tell you with some comfort that it didn't hurt to gamify. The scores were good. They were better than my regular class. In science, there's a big concern about how girls do versus boys, because that at least in the high school level, there's always a concern about a gap being there. So I ran those numbers just in case. And one thing I found very quickly, which was it was good and bad. The males in the population, which took to the idea of levels and achievements, all that very, very quickly. I didn't have to explain much there. Almost all of them, which is rare, all of them got better than 80% on the first initial benchmarks. And usually those numbers go up, but the initial benchmarks are usually not that good. Usually you have a mix. Maybe 70% of the kids will achieve better than the 80%. But almost all the males got to that level when I first benchmarked, which was great, except that wasn't the case with the females. The females got a more standard average curve that I normally see in the classroom, even though that classroom was about half and half. So, and then looking again, gamified versus traditional, male versus female, I still have the gap. Overall, the gamified groups did better, but there was still a gap there. So that wasn't great. I mean, part of why I wanted to gamify was to even the playing field, and bring that motivation in that brings everyone to work on it equally. So it was a concern and something that I thought would be interesting to share. Now, my conclusion from this effort was the impact of the game was remarkable. And I'm not talking about the numbers. There was a lot, the grades did seem to improve, and that's important. But that wasn't my main concern. My main concern was to address what I had noted when I first started working as a teacher, which was how inefficient the process was. I mean, a lot of days I felt like I was pulling a cart with square wheels. You know, the kids don't like the process. They find the memorizing, the worksheets, the textbooks, all very boring, despite song and dance that I might try to do in class. And I still had some of that, but the gamification aspect brought an excitement to the classroom, brought an interest level. Kids were coming down and sitting down. So the classroom management issues went way down. The way the achievements worked, again, all I was given was a little badge. It was a piece of paper I was gluing to their avatar on a wall. They would fight over who could tutor whom to be able to get that badge. It was crazy. My classroom was filled with tutors every day, and I had to do nothing. They would set that up themselves with someone that needed help, and they would come in and tutor. And I'd have a sign-up list for them to sign in, that they're signing in and signing out. The behavior was improved. It was remarkable the way the gamification, even the simple level gamification, affected the classroom. And that's one of the first things that sold me on it. Now, this particular method has some negatives also. I was very traditional still, and I hated that part. I felt that was keeping me back. It took quite a bit of work. It was very analog, so a lot of cutting things out and pasting things up. And I definitely wanted to go more digital to cut some of that effort out of the system. The XP system could be exploited because it was point-based. So kids could go back and do work to get more points by reviewing and retaking and stuff like that, which is great. But kids that already did well could try to keep getting points by doing work that they didn't need to do, which I've had mixed feelings about. They're doing more work out of their own volition, which is great, but their grades were getting a little bit inflated. And some of the rewards also kind of helped, because some of the rewards they could redo homework or stuff like that, which I didn't feel great about doing anything that affected the grade. Obviously, it didn't quite address the gender gap, and it was missing a narrative. And that's something I'll address later. But I definitely think the narrative portion of the gamification can't be left out. And I did hear, and there was a context that was missing that I addressed in later efforts. The next method that I tried was chronologically the next method, was using a very similar method, but now I'm using more of a digital. I want to use a more digital format. It was blended. It had a lot of computer components where the kids worked independently, but it was still synchronous. I was still doing tests on the same day. And a lot of things happened at the same time, which doesn't really give much differentiation. So kids that got it quickly would have to kind of wait for everyone else. So that was something that I addressed in later trials of gamification. So for this attempt, it was very ambitious. I actually did, and you'll see a couple of these, I did trailers. The kids getting into it was very important. Selling the idea to your audience is very important. That goes for technology that you want to introduce to the classroom, or any kind of new ideas. You have to be able to introduce it in a way that you don't have that fight back effect. Because if you have to fight them to get them to adopt it, it lengthens how long it takes to adopt it, and it doesn't make it quite as effective. So this is the trailer that I did for this effort. Hopefully this plays. Hopefully there's audio.
We're not getting clear audio, Enrique. Is that a YouTube video by any chance?
It is not, although I do have it on YouTube, so I can share the link.
Because we can play YouTube videos in this platform, and then we can clearly hear the audio.
Okay. It's not crucial, but I do have it.
Okay.
On YouTube.
Yeah, you see the video link up at the top. If you just drop the YouTube URL in there, you can play it a lot easier.
Okay. I'll do that for the next one. Let me continue, just because you guys saw the video though, right? There's just some epic music that you missed out on, but it's not an essential component.
Yeah.
The narrative was a world that was flooded because of climate change. I tried to bring in some science topics into the narrative itself. Humanity was gone, and the students were new sentient races that were rising to recolonize the world using what they know of biology. So within the context of the game, learning the objectives such as population growth and biomolecules, etc., would give them advantages in the game, as well as, of course, it was the topics they need to learn for biology. So this time the narrative and the game were woven together, as well as the rules. The students were grouped into groups of 4. And the reason I did that instead of the individual experience from before was that I wanted to build a support system in. So by combining students together and having a conglomerate of their grades be the way they achieve the objectives in the game, then they would need to help each other out. So if someone's kind of dragging behind, then I kind of combine some of the kids to make sure I get that effect. Then they'd want to tutor them and help them get the grades so they can get the points they needed to purchase the things in the game. The syllabus was this monstrous 38-page booklet that had like 2 pages of syllabus and 36 pages of the 10 races in the game, the way the map worked. This was elaborate. It was a full-blown. I went all out after my experience, but the last one was so successful. I wanted to go to get much deeper with it. The game utilized Google spreadsheets, which this is one looked like here, for the teams to be able to tell me what they wanted to do. They had units. It was like Civilization. They had units that would start in one little city and were spreading out. And to do that, they had to buy more units and buy technology and things. And to get the resources to buy all these things was based on their grade, their combined grade as a group. So if someone was lagging behind, it would bring down their average. So that was using gold. So in the spreadsheet, they would tell me where they would move units, if they wanted to build anything in the city, and each person in the group had a particular role. There was someone in charge of resources, someone in charge of building, someone in charge of warfare, and then someone in charge of the entire group. And that's that way each person had a particular responsibility within the group. There was a huge map, and there's a link, and I'll share the link in chat. The original map was put up on MapForge was the name of the website, which is now gone, and it allowed me to put in their units and move them around manually, but then you could see them digitally. So I could add elements to the map, and the map you could zoom in and zoom out. It was a really cool tool, but it is also very much gone now. The map, let's see where they put the map. I don't think I brought it up, but there's a link from I'll put it in chat. There's a link from the Prezi that shows you where the map is. And I have a lot of Prezis. And the map is this one. I created the map using an online tool, and I had to make lots of tiles to get it to fit because it was enormous. But I wanted enough room for the whole semester and all the classes, because all classes were playing at the same time, to have enough room to be able to play in the map. Okay. So I'll drop it in chat. That's a copy of the map. So bottom line was the kids were these races. They by doing schoolwork or the work for biology, they would get the gold they needed to fuel their race. By completing objectives, they could build onto their cities. They had about 10 minutes at the beginning of class, every class, to work on this and to strategize and to make alliances and etc. This is what it looked like. The kids were, there's a MacBook Pros. A lot of the work was digital. By this time, I had populated Moodle with a lot of this. It was quest-based. So there was a quest, like, for example, figure out which organic molecule will help your race have more energy so they can do more, for example. They had choices within each quest. They had different choices to what they could do. They could do a paper, they could do presentation, etc. So there was a lot of independence. There's a lot of independence here. They worked, and I would work with them one-on-one, which is exactly where I wanted to be. This was the year that I stopped lecturing and stopped losing my voice every spring. On the board over here, you can see their capitals. They had little maps with their capitals where they could add on buildings, which were magnets. Each one had a motto. They come up with all these weird mottos, some of them not entirely appropriate, and names for their empire. You see they're in groups in 4. So it was asynchronous, so they could take the test with some limits. They had to take the test within a certain amount of time, but if they were ready as a group, so they had to make sure everyone was ready, then they could take it together. So it was a pretty ambitious effort. So much so that it failed. So this was great for about the first 3.5 weeks. And then after that, the whole thing fell apart. The impact before falling apart was incredible. And there's one anecdote that actually I use a lot for gamification in general, but it came from this effort. And that was a student that I got a warning about. And if those are high school teachers, might know this kid, the one that a teacher comes to you and says, by the way, you're getting so-and-so, be careful. They have a chip on their shoulder. They're known for violent behavior. You have to treat them with kid gloves. And this is traditional biology class. And that particular kid, after the second week, was the first one sitting down and working. And I had teachers literally coming to my door and looking in disbelief that that was the case. Because he would come in, he would sit down, he would look at the orders, you see where what his units were doing. He was all about doing the notes and getting the work done because he wanted to get the goal to achieve. So he was one of the examples I always remember. And after this failed, it wasn't about a month, about 4 weeks after this whole thing fell apart, that he cussed out a teacher, walked out of school, ended up in handcuffs. And after that, I think ended up in military school. So not great. So what happened was Google Docs were not reliable back then. Some of the orders would get lost. It wouldn't update when I would check them from home. The amount of work to update the map, I didn't expect that, and ended up spending 3 or 4 hours a day just on the game, and it became overwhelming. I was coaching, but I was still coaching back then. I had my other school work, and it was way too much work. So I dropped it all. I still had the Moodle, so kids could still work in a blended environment, but all the game components had got dropped. So lessons learned, very immersive. A lot of the pieces worked, it didn't work smoothly. You have to kind of think ahead. This is kind of why I'm doing this here. Students were very engaged, very focused, very attentive to their work. It changed behaviors without the PBIS achievements that I had done before. But it was too intensive on the teacher, not sustainable. Also, it took a long time to prepare, over 6 weeks in the summer to get all this ready, between the maps, the Moodle site with all the information, and the way the spreadsheets worked. So after that, I went easier. There was some time where I still used the Moodle for a while just to do blended. But the next time I did a serious game, and these are my major achievements. I've done a lot of smaller things, but these are the big ones. I used a board game. Let me go back, actually. So I adopted a board game to serve as a vehicle for gamification in the classroom. This is not using a board game that teaches science, like the photosynthesis board game that just came out, or the evolution board game. This is using a board game that's got nothing to do with education and adapting it to the classroom, which, by the way, could be done with a number of games if you have the imagination to know how to adapt it. So this is adapting a board game using the fact that it already has the mechanics, the pieces, and a lot of the materials ready, so you don't have to do that portion, and use it in the classroom. Okay, so the setup. Oh, this is such a good video. This one I might actually, I might, well, Is there no easy way? I guess there's no easy way to share it, but actually, if you guys should be able to play it.
Yeah, there is. All we need is the YouTube URL, and we can play it like instantly.
Get it from. Actually, I can do it from here, I think. So I only have this one. Let's see, my channel. Oh, there it is. Okay. Pause. Okay. Again, I'm big into the trailers and the and getting the kids to.
And go up into the video link at the top. There you go.
Okay. I guess I press play.
Yeah.
Those are shots from the actual game, the actual board game. And the other are just clips that I stitched together. Yeah, I enjoyed making that video, if you can't tell. Let me go back to sharing a screen. Okay, so that's the game, Twilight Imperium. It's a board game. You can get it off the shelves. It's a little outdated now. You have to get another different edition of it. There's a website, and I will share the website now, where I put up all the rules and races and everything else, which is great because that helped communicate to parents and anyone else that was curious how it worked, what the process was. And kind of similar to what I had before, the achievements the kids had in class would give them the resources to buy ships and do other things. PBIS was used to get cards to give them special advantages. The kids were in groups of 4. They chose themselves. They had to choose a race. But this time, the pieces were there. The map was there, all in the game. Everything was set up for me. The rules were adapted to work in the classroom, but it was a whole lot less work than coming up with rules from scratch. We used Survey. We used a Google Survey tool for the orders this time instead of spreadsheet. But this was a few years back, a few years after my previous attempt, so it worked a lot more smoother. Overall, the whole thing actually worked kind of like I wanted to. No surprises. So I wasn't lecturing. Again, all the materials were online, so it was a blended environment. And the reason why this works over, say, a MOOC, and MOOCs are blended environments where everything's online. Difference is that the game components kept everyone interested and motivated throughout the year. So the game was fun. I mean, another reason why I used it is because I wish I was in the classroom, and I had other teachers tell me they wish they were in the classroom playing because it was just a neat space exploration game. I ran all 3 sections of biology at once, so it was second, third, and fourth block playing at once, and I ran the whole year. I ran from the first week to the last week of school. Now, for those that are doing higher ed, if you think this is just for kids, now that I've been doing nothing but training and coordination at Duke and I work with adults, let me tell you that this would be just as effective with that environment. With the college crowd, especially, they would eat this up even more so than some of the kids I had back in high school. The way it works, the complexity level is just right. So it's not so simple that they kind of poo-poo on it. Here's a couple of kids looking over it. They would come in every morning and strategize. They would stay after school and strategize. At lunchtime, they would come and strategize. It was actually scary how well the immersion component worked. Prepping the game was a lot easier by comparison. Updating the physical board was pretty easy because it's moving the pieces around. I had to buy some extra pieces to accommodate the size of the classroom, but other than that, the setup by comparison to some other efforts was much easier. The results, terrific engagement. Students were discussing strategy at all times. It was a very memorable experience. I wrote a narrative up every time they did orders, kind of give them some color to the background to what they were doing, and they would come in every morning and read kind of like the morning news about what happened in the game. The valedictorian, actually, when she graduated, and I went to her graduation, it was one of the last classes that I taught, and I was already working at Duke, but I wanted to go back and see those kids graduate. Mentioned one thing for each of her 4 years at school, and for her sophomore year, this was it, the game, because it was just an intense experience. The kids would be thinking about it at home, apparently texting each other, I was told. So it was crazy effective. So much so that it becomes kind of a detriment, because it was sometimes so engaging that they tended to think about that more than the content. So it's something that I'd have to worry about. There was no connection between the material and the game. So the game was great, and it had its own narrative, and there was a story, but it was not connected to the content itself this time. And that was a fault. That was something that I did need to remedy, but it wasn't remedied easily, because I was using something out of a box. It's not so easy to adapt the material component. The rules were easy enough to adapt. However, if a teacher is doing gamification for the first time, I would highly recommend this method, because it's a lot easier to set up and get ready and get going. And then see the power of it, and then think about how you'd make your own game from there. But this was one of the higher successes, one of the better successes I had over the last few years doing this. Okay, so the next effort was a year after that, and it was a really busy year because we were shifting LMSs. First, Open Class by Pearson, and the state was saying they were going to Open Class, so I was charged with learning Open Class because I'd be teaching it to the teachers. And I spent a long time during the summer learning Open Class, but then they switched over to Canvas last minute, and I had to learn Canvas, and I had almost no time for setting things up. So this was my attempt to do a last minute gamification. Ended up being a really interesting experience. So setting up here, this was and you guys can follow along. I have a link because luckily this was public. Where is it? Here's the course. Here it is. Okay, so this was using a Canvas LMS as a vehicle for gamification, sort of. I built it into a narrative using maps. Now I have a lot of LMS experience from Moodle back in Chatham Central, and then a lot of Blackboard when I went to school, Open Class, Sakai. Here at Duke, they have another LMS they use. So this is a screenshot of what my LMS looked like. It's called Biology Quest, and they would enter the quest, and they were within this narrative. They were charged with getting through the map and doing all these quests and succeeding. So there was a story to it. The maps were interactive. I built them using ThingLink, which lets you bring an image and put in links on the image. I used Google Draw for the Photoshop work that you see here with the lines and all that. So it was all free tools that I had available to me. There were characters made in Voki, and Voki is a tool that lets you make characters that speak. And it would speak to the players, which were the students, about what they were doing and their progress. An example, here is Tavern Brawl, and here is a guy, and he would actually speak, would say this, but I had it written in case there was any kids that were more visual learners than auditory, so they could just read it. Here is, welcome to Stonehaven, maybe you can help us, everyone is tired and grumpy all the time, I think it has to do with their diet. We don't get a really balanced diet, and there will be a number of questions here that were the topics they need to learn about. And then they were let loose on a map. Here, the map was the Tavern Brawl. and there would be links within this map that they could click on. I use CK12. If you never used CK12, CK12.org, I think it is. They're a site out of California, and they have free digital textbooks, almost everything. I think their social studies could use some expansion, but their science library is very, very well done. Their math library too, and English, I think. So anyway, all their stuff is free and available. It's digital textbooks. It's what I used for years when I was teaching, and never could understand why the county wanted to keep buying physical textbooks that never update. But anyway, they would get digital textbooks as well as activities, simulations, games, and using those, they had to get the answers to these questions, which is what they're responsible for. But they were independent. They had to kind of do it on their own. All the links were there, all the information was there, but it was on them to find it and get to it and extract important components. The results, and by the way, I gave you that link, and it's the whole thing. And the advantage of Canvas is that I was able to post the entire course at the Creative Commons, which means any teacher with Canvas could upload it and edit it. So I was very happy with that tool. Another tools in the LMS that I didn't have before. So all my projects I tried to make as available as possible to other teachers, because the goal was always try to influence not teachers around me, but teachers in general to pick up gamification because of the impact it has in the classroom and the way it changes the experience for the learners for the much more positive. So the LMS has built-in analytics. I could do assessments within it. It would show me all kinds of scores, with standard deviations as far as how effective the instruction was, where I need to do more work. So it was great to have a tool that I could use for the gamification instruction that could also give me the data that I wanted. I had all the assignments online. The assessments were done with the tool, so it was all very seamless. So I love that aspect of this project, although there was some stuff that I wish I had in it, was that everything was done within the one tool. I didn't have to go back and forth to an analog and digital or different digital tools. And because I could embed everything within the Canvas pages, I had the Voki in there, I had the ThingLink in there, any simulations I could run within it. It was all a very seamless experience, which is good for the kids. It's kind of jarring to go back and forth, kids or adults, between different LMSs or different tools. It was really easy for the kids to navigate because an LMS kind of has everything nested, and the map made them kind of intuitively go back and forth. And I guess, what time is it? I can show a bit more on. So you see Biology Quest here. The directions are very straightforward. You basically have, oh, there's a Voki here. See if he speaks. This is what a Voki looks like. These tools are still available and free. I don't know if you probably were not getting the audio, but you have the link so you can go kind of here on your own. It tells you how to navigate the maps. And then there was a huge map of the world, and this was an entire biology class. They started here, our Arcanum Rubrum, and it's very easy to understand that you have to go through all these topics to get to the end. And this was a whole curriculum, and any one of them, there was another map, kind of a smaller map, that they had to interact with, and a character that tells them the story, what the challenge is, the questions they needed to know to be able to do this, and then another map that had all the links to the resources they needed, and a rubric at the end for their notes, because good note taking was essential. So I kind of included that in there. So what I didn't like was the fact that there was not really any game components. There's no points. There was no there wasn't game components that I had in previous efforts. It was mostly all narrative. And the narrative by itself is great. It's a very important part of gamification, but it needs to be paired with the game components of the achievements, of the points of the competition. And that was missing. And sometimes the kids got bored of the routine. So it wasn't perfect, but it did work very well as far as some of the efforts I've done. So it wasn't quite as engaging or immersive as I would have liked. I have gotten teachers email me about this. They pick it up from their own Canvas. And I told them kind of had to pick it up and get going with it for their own classes. All right, so then that brings me to virtual worlds, which is a whole topic unto itself. So virtual worlds, using a pervasive virtual environment for instruction. All right, and I had several smaller experiences with it as I learned about it. And Lisa has much more experience with virtual worlds than I do. She's been doing Second Life for a while. But as I picked it up, I immediately realized that its potential. I researched it. I looked into it. I got into Second Life myself as I began to learn about it. And I became very convinced of its educational value. I made a club for the kids to learn about Second Life and virtual worlds, so I could teach myself and bring them into it. And that's actually the group of kids that I had in my club. I did activities with it, small activities. The Smithsonian hosts a Day of the Dead in Second Life, and I had a Spanish class. I made a bunch of accounts. I made a Spanish class come into my classroom, and we all did this the Day of the Dead. There was a scavenger hunt, and the kids got immersed. And you never seen, there were middle school kids. There was a different teacher. A group of kids quite so quiet as that group of kids. The teacher was blown away how they got so immersed in the Day of the Dead, into the music, the activities that were going on. The virtual club made a virtual art gallery, and we took the Art 3 class prints, we scanned them, we put them on this virtual structure in Second Life, and we had visitors from Dutch visitors from Germany, South America, a bunch from here, North America, visit and leave comments to the kids. And I read to the kids the comments folks made on their art, and they were blown away that those were even possible. So a lot of potential there. So much so that I went through and got a certificate in virtual worlds from the University of Washington. I wanted to do more with it. I understood the power of it. The school bought a small plot in Second Life. There's our space in Second Life. It's gone now, but it had an auditorium and a space to meet. And we started making, a colleague of mine, Salas, and I started making learning objectives, learning interactives within Second Life. But what we learned very quickly was that Second Life is a public space. It's got a lot of mature content, and you can't always keep the kids from it. It wasn't set up. Once upon a time, there was a teen island that kind of helped address that, but not anymore. Now it's just an open space, and we caught kids with the mature content that they got on the marketplace and decided that it was not secure enough for our purposes. So this idea was scrapped right near the beginning of it, even though it seemed to have a lot of potential. So we went to OpenSim. This is OpenSim, which is kind of like Second Life Lite. It's open source. You can go to a place called kitely.com and get your own virtual space, which is what we did. It's got a huge space. It's not quite as slick as Second Life, but it is private. And that's what we did. And we started this huge project called Insomnium. Insomnium was our idea to make a grand narrative World of Warcraft type game where kids would come into this castle and go into the dreams of people. There was an antagonist who was polluting the world by feeding them false information through their dreams. And the students were responsible for learning the right information and then checking scenarios to see how the dream was altered to be wrong and then have to correct it. So the idea was for them to learn the information and then be able to correct a scenario where false information was being used and have to tease that out. We made space for the students to live because we thought that having ownership or having a presence in the space, besides being visitors, by actually living there, by having their own little rooms, would give them more ownership of their avatars and be more immersed. And we had all these activities that were very, very interactive to teach biology and English, because Salas was an English teacher. And there's all the activities. This was a fail. This was about 8 weeks of intensive work to realize that to do that level of complexity, because we have to have different instances. So for any one activity, it could be 30 kids doing it at once. So you have to do different copies of it running at the same time, collecting that data, which is difficult to do the way it was scripted, because OpenSim is not quite as capable as Second Life. It took too long. It was too ambitious. It reminds me of another talk we had here earlier about someone doing something similar with Odysseus. And they also found out that complexity is not your friend, and they made things simpler, which is what I did. So this was a very big project. I think it was the right way to go, but teachers are unable to do this kind of complexity. It requires programmers, which is something I'll harp on later if I have time, but basically teachers need to be paired with programmers to be able to do this level of work. So here's what I did with it. I scrapped all that and made BioTown. Now, BioTown was actually fairly successful. It was an OpenSim platform again, and all the biology objectives, all 13 of them, were made into structures. Each structure, each building, you can see one here, represents a certain topic. And within it, it had all the links, visuals, and some simple interactives for that topic. And the kids were all there all at once, and they all traveled kind of together. Some got ahead, some didn't. It was asynchronous. I did a whole presentation on it within the virtual world. So within Second Life, I have a group called the Science Circle that does presentations about things of this nature, and I presented on it. So if anyone's interested in hearing a lot more about BioTown, Here it's about an hour's worth of presentation on Biotown. I'm giving you the kind of the skinny of it, but it was a town and it covered all 13 topics. And within those buildings were enough digital texts, assessments, interactives for anyone to teach themselves biology without anything else. It was completely independent. The results, putting together wasn't that bad. Teachers could do this. OpenSim is a lot easier doing this format where you're just kind of dropping it in and using it like an LMS to kind of host your links and assessments. It's not bad. The buildings were freely available. I didn't do anything too fancy. The kids enjoy the format. They love to play with their avatars. They love having a virtual presence. They were immersed to a degree. But there was no real gamification to it. So the lack of the game mechanics means there was no drive. Excuse me, no drive. There was none of the excitement that was built by game mechanics in previous efforts. They love to play with their avatars a little bit too much. I had kids that would change their clothes every day. I had kids that would make themselves be grotesque by changing the size of their head. So that's a problem that I knew was going to happen, but it's unavoidable because I had to make something last minute. Having everyone there at the same time was not conducive to the work. You want to have some of the serious learning to be independent with activities that are social and together, but not everything social together. That's too much. It was a client-based world, so I had to run it on the desktops that are in my room. They wouldn't work on Chromebooks, they wouldn't work on phones. So that's something that I want to address with future projects. And the interactions were very basic. I didn't try to get as fancy with the last project. I learned my lesson. They were very straightforward. The good thing is I could do assessments within World, and it would email me results, which is one of the nicer things. Okay, so the last thing I'll talk about is when I try to gamify the entire school. This was right towards the end. So this is taking the gamification to a whole other level. For the first time, I left my classroom and I tried to apply gamification on a school-wide basis. The setup. Oh, this is another good video. I'm on time. I'll skip the video. You can watch it on your own, but it's a pretty exciting video. This was very much like Harry Potter. 4 houses, and I'm not being original here. Other middle schools and high schools have done this kind of gamification style to their own schools. I just found ways to adapt it to my school and use what I learned. You see this huge board made out of wood. Those are for sand, and the sand is put in when they based on the grades of the houses. The houses were a quarter of the student body. The whole school was split up into 4 houses. Randomly, we had a sorting ceremony, and then their grades were basically took all their grades and made kind of a conglomerate of them, added them up, and then put them in there as sand. And the higher the sand, the better grades you did for that month. It was monthly. We also gave points for sports achievements. So you're in a sport and you score a goal, for example. Teachers could give you points for activities, for helping out, for cleaning, for science fair projects, etc. There's a lot of ways you could get points, but it all was PBIS. For good behavior. It was all for academic achievement as well as athletic achievement. We had special competitions every week where there was the dance off versus sing off. There was a sack race. There was improv. There was all kinds of competitions between the houses that we tried to involve different style kids in each competition. Some were athletic, some were more social. And I do have the website for that in case you want to see more about how that worked. World map. Where is the Weebly? Oaktown, Twilight Imperium. There it is. So here's the website. It's still active. They're using it to some degree. I mean, I left everything set up, but it's not as active as it was when I was there. The other cool thing was that we give the kids these ropes that were the color of their house, and they could wear them at graduation. So they have nothing else at graduation because they weren't valedictorians or they didn't have anything that they'd done. They could wear that. So I was glad to have something they could have with them for recognition. Now the student body loved it, especially in the beginning. Very excited. Good inclusion because the house was a support structure. You wanted to help everyone within the house. So upperclassmen, lowerclassmen, they'll help each other out. No one was excluded. The kids that normally would have no friends, they were immediately welcomed into the family. I was one of the house leaders. I had house nobles. There's a support system kind of built in, as I mentioned. They love the competition. They love the hype behind the challenges. So that was great. The bad thing about it is that a project outside your classroom, be it at that level or higher ed, requires a lot of support from the administration and other teachers. And what I saw that waned a lot, especially towards the end, and everyone got busy, and a lot of it kind of fell back on my shoulders. So it was a ton of work. I would not have done that again because it relies too much on others, and I find myself becoming more and more independent as I do these things, except for the part where I can't do some of the things I want to do independently. So presently, things that I'm doing on my own now that I'm not in a classroom anymore, have more time. I'm trying to build a board game built for gamification that comes out of the box, something a teacher could buy and take to the classroom and be ready to go to use for gamification. There's nothing like that right now out there. Based on Aquos, the first project that I did, it's well, there's a Dutch company kind of looking at it, but I'm not sure if it's going to go anywhere. That's it right there. It takes a lot of what I learned before, and I'm trying to make something that a teacher could buy and use in the classroom out of the box to gamify their whole semester. We'll see if that goes anywhere. The second thing is I designed a video game, 81 page document right here, entire video game to teach biology, which I started to build using the Unreal Engine before I realized that I'm not a game company and can't actually do that. But it's all written out, all the entire curriculum based on these cool little killing these special monsters and activities and searches and quests, all within a game. It's a game about survival in a post-apocalyptic world. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. And last thing is follow you on adventure using Captivate, which Captivate is a tool that I can use. This is a project that I'll probably spend more time on because I could do it myself, while the others are a bit more difficult for me to accomplish on my own. So the future. As you can see, I've done different styles, and I could have stuck to any one style. I could have just done the board game all 7 years, or I could have done just the LMS all 7 years. But my thing was trying to find out what works, what doesn't work, try different styles, all narrative, all mechanics, what's in between, trying to figure out what's the answer, what's the magic bullet if there is one, or what works best. Of course, there's not one answer, and every teacher will have their own perspective of what works best. But in my opinion, the answer has to have equity. It can't just be my classroom benefits. That's one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of these. When I go to conferences and folks talk about what they're doing in the classroom, they got this cool equipment, they got this university that comes out and brings this stuff to help them do it or whatever. That's great for those kids. How about everybody else? So anything I work on, I try to work on something that can be put online and used by everyone with access. Because short of that, then it becomes a very limiting experience. I think it is a virtual world for a lot of reasons. I think it is gamified. I think it uses web VR, which is available on mobile devices and Chromebooks, so it's on every platform that can get internet. It is an MMORPG. The reason MOOCs didn't work is that MOOCs have no reason for you to stick around. They don't have the motivation. MMORPG is massive, lots of players, but it has that narrative, it has that role-playing aspect, collaborative as well as independent, that would make it work and keep you interested years after years. People that play WoW are still playing it now. They've been doing it for 2 decades. The quests are multidisciplinary. All I can do is biology, unfortunately, because that's all I know. But they need not be. That idea of individual subjects as an industrial age mentality of having everything in compartments. It needs to be math plus science plus English plus social studies, different areas of study, all combined into seamless quest, because that's how life works. You go do a job, you don't just write or just do math. You combine all these. So it has to have that aspect. Asynchronous, everyone works at their own pace, and facilitated by carrying teachers that can work with you one-on-one. You do the work independent, but you have that one-on-one support. So that's a lot to get through. It's a lot of big projects, but I'm trying to stick within that 1 hour deadline. I know Lisa has something at 4, but I think I got through it. Good luck. Hopefully everyone here has either tried this or is thinking about trying this. Good luck in your own efforts. There's a lot of ways to do this. I do want to share a few things, some books that I've used along the way. This is a good one. Why don't students, there you go, like school? Actually, hold on. I need the camera to be able to show you that. Let me see how I can get off of there. Oh, there we go. You guys see me now? Hope so. All right. So this is a good one. Why don't students like school? As far as the cognitive process of the mentality of kids that are 6 through 12, if you work with that age group, because they're different from working with adults. You have to understand that to be able to be effective. General gamification. I'm a big Carl Kapp fan. This is one of Carl's first books that I got. This is all in my library. So the gamification of learning and instruction is a good one. He also does the field book, which is great. Lee Sheldon has some good reading, and there's a lot of material there now. When I first started, there was only a couple of books. Now there's a whole host. So whatever you find that you enjoy. And of course, support. Go to the conferences. A lot of us out there that are doing this that are more than happy to help you in doing this. I can share my screen again. My email, my personal email is there at the bottom in case you have any questions. Oh, there are questions up. Oh my goodness, there's 8 questions up here. Let me look at the questions.
You do have questions, and I do need to step away from my meeting. I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to comment, Enrique. Number one, what a career, exploring. I appreciated your showing your pathway over many, many years, and all of the reflections and analysis that you did. The trials, the testing was really fascinating and pretty inspiring. Beatrix can read you or feed you through the questions, and we're going to keep the recording going. But I do need to step away, so I just wanted to thank you and really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we have some questions. I'm seeing some raising hands. So Enrique, do you have time to start delving into this? Great. Cool. Okay. So some of these relate back to points in your talk. So out of context, they might not always make sense, but we'll try. First one, Jorge is asking, what was the use of the group chat just related to in this game-based learning? Like what, I guess we could go back to in your examples, which ones involved group chat, and did you find that was like helpful in the learning experience and community building?
So this was all very strange in that I was doing all these blended classroom environments, but all the kids were physically in the same space. So I didn't have to use group chats because they were all physically around each other. But the conversations in the space were very important. They would either to ask questions to one another, which was great because it would provide that support, and to try to come up with answers between themselves. I think the same kids dropped into a much larger context of the entire classroom would get lost, would know who to talk to, who they could trust, but dropped into the smaller groups were more likely to look for that support from the others because they just felt safer. They felt better with that smaller environment. So although I didn't do group chat per se on the computer because we were physically there able to do it that way, the small chat groups, that collaboration co-op feature was very important. I hope that answers that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a great answer. So next one from Hillary. She's asking, when you have multiplayer groups, do students have free will over their actions, or do they have a predefined script or role that they're trying to meet, like in your experience?
There were roles. There were 4 roles that they get to each choose. Both of the games were very similar in the roles. One was going to be like a CEO or in charge of the group, going to help everyone make decisions and not get frozen up on a particular matter.
Mm-hmm.
Someone to make a call. Someone in charge of resources, because resources were always a factor. Someone in charge of like warfare or fighting, because that was always kind of a factor there. And someone in charge of technology, because technology was, I think, part of most of the narratives. But the point was that each had a defined role they had to be good at and give advice on, so they could each feel like they could contribute.
Great. Cool. Adam asks, when did you do the bulk of your game making experiences? Was it usually over the summer, or did you do it during the year? How did that look?
The summer. It was vast amounts of the summer. I'm talking like 6-7 days a week working most of the day. So I won't lie. A lot of this is a lot of work, which is why I was glad to be able to put it online so folks can just pick it up and use it and not have to take that kind of time. But it is work.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. With your, Hillary's asking now, with your learning experiences, having to put a project aside and try something a little different, do you recommend shorter modules? Like, I guess, what timelines are you working with?
You mean, I mean like I had 13 modules, but it was broken up differently. But each module would take a different amount of time depending on the topic. And there were many ways to break it up. But usually I didn't rely, it wasn't the game that defined the length, it was the topic itself. And some things just take a while for the users to learn it. So I just needed to spend the extra time to get the extra reinforcement in.
Cool. Let's see. Oh, Adam also brought up I think this was a Second Life or Second Life-esque environments like OpenSim. Did you have a tutor avatar available to kind of like guide the students or keep them from going too crazy?
So again, this is an artifact of the weird physical digital classroom I ran. I was right there, and I was always walking amongst the kids to provide that one-to-one assistance. Had that not been the case, had this been an online environment where I wasn't physically there to gently
Mhm.
remind them to please get off that person's head, then yes. And when I took classes at the University of Washington, which was I did it through Second Life, there was always a teacher assistant that was there to help folks with
Mhm.
technology problems, to help folks that were being disruptive, et cetera. So I would definitely recommend, if you're doing pure digital environment, to have an extra person there to help with those matters so the instruction is not interrupted.
Yeah, great. Okay, we only have two more. They're both from Corey. He's asking, have you done small frame scenarios for a single lesson? And also, have you looked at Carnegie Mellon resources and would you recommend them if so? And he has a link.
I would have to look. I know Carnegie Mellon's works on some of this. Not MIT also. They have a whole 8-bit system. But I haven't looked at Carnegie Mellon's in particular. But I would recommend every resource that you can get your hand on and read through it. And there's a lot out there, but pretty much you're going to find that there's certain ones that that speak to you, that basically you take to based on your background, your gaming experience, what you feel comfortable doing in the classroom, and your classroom style. So expose yourself to as much as you can, and then pick up the things that work for you. Don't feel like you need to shoehorn yourself into a particular style because this book said so. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of ways of doing it, like you can see by what I've done. You gotta find what you're comfortable with. Smaller scenarios and single lessons, just break out into style games. No, that's a lot of folks do that, and that's great. Like Brain Pop and other things where you do single scenarios. That was never my goal. For me, it was always searching for something that would work over the entire curriculum. Partly because it takes a long time, even for a small goal, to do it. So if I'm going to spend the time, might as well make it seamless for the students and make it one narrative, one style of quest, one tool that spans all 18 weeks.
Absolutely. And that's a great goal. And with that, we are done with questions. And thank you so much. I learned so much. It was really excellent. Would you mind putting in the chat your contact information you'd be willing to make available for if people have more questions?
There's my personal email. I'll use that. I won't use the Duke one just because some of those education components from high school are not entirely something that Duke is involved with in my present state here. But feel free to email me at any time. I've helped teachers. I've done workshops, and I'm more than happy to do that for anyone else if they have questions.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. It was really, really wonderful. And yeah, it's right 4:00, so perfect timing. I will stop recording. And thank you. It was really great talk.
If anyone wants to look